built this city on rock and roll. You'll recognize my face. Say you don't care who goes to that kind of place. Knee deep in hoopla, sinking in your fight. Too many runaways, speeding up the night. Marconi plays the mamba, listen to the radio. Oh, do remember, we built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Someone's always playing corporation games. Who cares? They're always changing corporation names. We just wanna dance here. Someone stole the stage. They call us irresponsible. Write us off the page. Marconi plays the mamba. Listen to the radio. Don't you remember? We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. It's just another Sunday in a tired old street. Police have got the chokehold. Oh, but we just lost the beat. Who counts the money underneath the bar? Who rides the wrecking ball into our guitars? Don't tell us you need us, 'cause we're the ship of fools, looking for America, crawling through your schools. Don't you remember, Marconi plays the mamba, listen to the radio. Don't you remember, we built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Catalyst. My name is JR. I'm the pastor here. And I have a question. How many of you have ever been to Seattle? A few, okay, a number of you. I have not. When you were in Seattle, how many of you visited the Museum of Pop Culture? You drove by it. Okay, a few of you. This is a place that I've always wanted to visit, in part because I love pop culture a lot. And so when friends of mine are in Seattle and they go to this place, they send me pictures of all the different, like the Star Wars stuff and the Alien stuff from, Ridley Scott, James Cameron, Alien franchise. And so it just looks amazing. All the displays look amazing. Well, I didn't know, but the museum was founded in 2000. That was when it was originally built. It started out as a museum for music, and it's kind of expanded into pop culture in the years since. But they hired a world-renowned architect named Frank Gehry to design the building. Gehry's designed all kinds of really interesting stuff around the United States. And so when Gehry unveiled the completed building that now houses the Seattle Museum of Pop Culture, this is what he came up with. It was not well received. Forbes listed it as one of the 10 ugliest buildings in the world. Another reviewer called it a blob. And the nicest review that I could find of it was from a British person who lived in Seattle. Brits are notoriously polite. And the review read, "Gehry has designed many wonderful buildings, but his Seattle effort is not one of them." I try to imagine what it must have been like to be Frank Gehry when he unveiled this building. He said the inspiration for it was guitars. I'm assuming maybe like smash guitars like rock and rollers are wont to do. But, to have this vision that he was so excited about, to release it into the world in this very public way, and for everyone to hate it, right? I mean, the city has warmed to it a little bit, but it's kind of become like that kooky aunt you have at the family reunion where, like, she's a little strange, but she's family, so it's fine. Like, that's kind of how Seattle natives treat the Museum of Pop Culture now. They're like, well, it's ugly, but it's our ugly. I have to believe that Gehry didn't intend his building to be received like that. And so all of the work, all of the effort that he put into it has to have in some way felt disappointing to him. And again, I know we don't have a ton of architects in here this morning, but I'm willing to bet you can relate to that feeling of having worked really hard on something, put a lot of your blood, sweat, and tears, your passion, your ideas, your love into this thing, and then, it just doesn't land like you hoped it would land. Right? And so this morning I want to particularly talk about what that looks like in our faith journey, because I think a lot of us, we work hard on our faith. I mean, the fact that you're here this morning means you're working on your faith. You're investing. You got up today and came to gather with God's people and to worship together. So you care about your faith enough to invest in it. So how do we know that the faith that we're building isn't, going to turn out like that? How do we know that we're building something that's going to be good, that's going to contribute good and hope and joy and life into the world? That's what we're going to talk about today. And what we're going to find is that a faith that is built to last, a faith that really is a statement of beauty and hope and life in the world, is one where we allow God to transform us even as we are being transformed. We're going to look at what that feels like today, what it means to live that kind of life out in the world around us. And it's all grounded, as we talked about last week, in God's love for us. So we're going to begin this morning by celebrating this God, by allowing God to love us so that we can respond to God's love with acts of faith. Would you stand with me as we begin singing together this morning?
Good morning, Catalyst. If we have not had a chance to meet, I'm Jake. I'm one of the worship leaders here. Welcome. I'm glad to see all of your bright and shining faces and the ones that are less bright and shiny. All of the faces are welcome. If you are a guest, we want to extend a special welcome to you today. We are glad you're here. All that we would ask of you is that you are willing to listen to what God may be trying to communicate to you this morning through our time of singing and of listening to the message that JR has prepared for us later. But if you are able and willing, would you join us in singing these songs?
Your love is devoted, like a ring of solid gold, like a vow that is tested, like a covenant of old. Your love is enduring through the winter rain and beyond the horizon, with mercy for today. Faithful you have been, and faithful you will be. You pledge yourself to me, and that's why I sing. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on strength becomes our own. Now you're making me like you, clothing me in white, bringing beauty from ashes. For you will have your bride, free from all her guilt and rid of all her shame, and known by her true name. And that's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. You will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. You will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. And that's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. You will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. You will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. And that's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips.
I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree.
His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still and all alone. Oh, praise the name of the Lord.
So I have our Beaker Mini here, so if you'll get that out. This has some information. We're going to go over some announcements before we get back into the teaching with JR. You can go ahead and have a seat.
This time, we thank you for this time of worship and this gathering, just to give you glory and honor this morning. We pray, God, that you would continue to be with us and that we would feel your presence and that we would be open to hear what you have to say through your word this morning. We thank you and we praise you in Jesus' name.
I was really excited to do announcements this morning. Sorry. So, first thing, we have Trunk or Treat coming up, and we're really excited about it this year. We're all going to work together on one really awesome trunk. This is going to be on October 26th, and we need some candy for that, of course. So if you could bring in some donations of candy, make sure it's individually wrapped. We'll take that candy. There'll be a box right out here. Also, this month is Pastor Appreciation Month. Yeah, so we want to show our love and gratitude for JR and Amanda and all they do to minister to us and support us, and thank them for their leadership. So we're going to collect a love offering for them. So if you'd like to donate to that, you can put Pastor Appreciation when you put your donation in the box, or if you give online, there's a place to indicate Pastor Appreciation there. So feel free to do that. Also, we're going to have a lunch for them after church on October 20th, and we also need your help bringing some food. So you can go ahead and RSVP on this Connect card, the tear-off portion. And if you put your phone number and email address, there's a place there you can get in contact with you about what food to bring. Okay. Also, we're going to tear this off here. And if you're a visitor with us today, we just got a few things. If you want to put your name down, we promise we have a 100% no stalking guarantee. So just want you to jot down a couple things. But we're going to tear this off together on the count of 3. So get ready, everybody. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, and that sound means it's time for our kids to go back to the lab where they can receive teaching this morning on their instructional level. And then we believe at Catalyst that peace comes into the world from God through us. So we're going to take a few moments this morning to greet one another. You can do this with just kind of doing a wave or a handshake or a hug or a high five, and just take a moment to say hello before we get back into the teaching.
That's what happens when you leave me in charge of bumper music. I like it too, that's why I chose it. So we started last week a series called Under Construction. And in this series, we're asking the question, what does it look like to build a faith that is strong, a faith that can weather the storms of life? I think it's a good question because probably if you're here, you all know someone who's like that, right? So maybe it was a parent or a grandparent, maybe it's a coworker or even a spouse or a partner, but you know someone in your life that has a really strong faith, that they seem secure. And it's not that they don't have bad stuff or stressful stuff happen to them. It's just that when they go through those things, they don't seem to be rocked by it, right? They seem really open and generous towards others. They don't seem to have the same kind of fear and anxiety of strangers that a lot of us have, but they just have this kind of open, warm, generous kind of a faith that seems to come from somewhere. And when we see that person, we want that kind of faith. Like, it's infectious. It's something that we want to be around. We want to just be in their presence. And honestly, we really want to know how to get that kind of relationship with God. And so that's what we're talking about in this series. To do that, we haven't done this a lot before. Typically in series, we'll go through a whole bunch of scripture or we'll follow the lectionary or something like that. But we're really just hanging out in a few verses in 1 Corinthians chapter 3 for the duration of this series. Because this is a space where Paul is talking to the church of Corinth about what it means to build a faith that's strong, a faith that lasts. And he uses a construction metaphor in there. So we're just kind of hanging out in that construction metaphor and asking, what does it look like to build a faith that lasts? So we started last week by looking at the foundation of faith. The thing you've got to start with if you're going to be building is the foundation, right? The thing that you're going to build everything else on. And Ashley told us that the foundation of our faith is Jesus. And I love what she did in her sermon, where she's like, yeah, like that's kind of the no-duh answer, right? If you ask a church person, what's the foundation of faith? We just smile and go, Jesus, because that's like, we call it the church answer, but it's also the right answer. Like, that's what Paul says, that Jesus is our foundation. So Ashley really spent some time digging into what do we mean when we say that. And we saw that to say that Jesus is our foundation means that we're saying that God comes for us. That God made the first move in establishing a relationship with us. By creating us and by coming to us in the person of Jesus, God sought us out. So that's the foundation of our faith. Anything that's not God choosing us first is not what we're building our faith on. So today, we're going to say, now that we've got that foundation established, that God made the first move, that God chose us, that God moved towards us first, that we love because God first loved us, now that we have that foundation established, what are we building on it? What is the thing that we're building on this foundation? Right? What is the character of it? Is it a house? Is it a apartment complex? Is it a bank? Like what are we building? What kind of building? What is the nature of it? And again, we're stretching the metaphor a little bit, but Paul does the same thing, so we're okay, right? And so we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. We're actually going to be flipping around or clicking around a little bit today, so kind of be ready for that. But if you grab one of the free Bibles out of the back, you can find 1 Corinthians 3 on 686. And if you don't have a Bible, please keep that one. So to answer this question, what are we building, or what is the character of our faith? What's the goal of our faith? Paul, in this little section that we're hanging out in, uses two metaphors. Okay, one of them is the building, but the other one is something else that I want you to watch for. And it caught me as I was preparing this series. It just struck me as weird because, it's kind of one of those things where you just read over it in the Bible and you're like, yeah, that's right. But if you kind of stop and hang out there for a second, it does strike you as just a little bit strange that Paul would link these two ideas together, right? So I want to read a lot of what we read last week, but I just want to read it again, and I want you to pay attention for the two metaphors that Paul uses to describe the project of our faith. So let's read again, beginning in verse 6. Paul says, I planted the seeds in your hearts, and Apollos watered it, but it was God who made it grow. It's not important who does the planting or who does the watering. What's important is that God makes the seed grow. The one who plants and the one who waters will work together with the same purpose, and both will be rewarded for their hard work. For we are both God's workers, and you are God's field, you are God's building. And then here's the verse that we hung out on last week. Because of God's grace to me, I have laid the foundation like an expert builder, and now others are building on it. Okay, so there's the building metaphor, but you caught that field metaphor, right? The God's talking about planting and watering and cultivating, right? So Paul has these two metaphors. He says, you are God's field, and you are God's building. Now again, I think those are both great metaphors, and you can probably tease out spiritual implications from both of them on your own, but they just don't logically follow from each other, right? Like if I said, think of a field, and then play word association, we'd probably have to be here quite a while before anyone said building. Right? Like those two ideas just aren't like intrinsically linked. But for Paul, when he's writing to this church that's suffering from these divisions, is trying to figure out how to do faith well together, the two metaphors that make sense to him to use together, right next to each other, are you are God's field, and you are God's building. So that's where I want to hang out today. I want to say, what was Paul thinking about? What was the picture in his mind of faith that made those two metaphors make sense together? Because if we can figure out what Paul had in his mind, that gives us a sense of what we're building on this foundation that he laid, which is Jesus' love for us. Does that make sense what we're going to do? Okay. So the field one is probably a little bit easier. We're not first century Jews, so what's obvious to Paul is not obvious to us, but we're going to work on it, right? So if you think about what Paul is talking about here, it sounds an awful lot like a farm, right? Because he talks about someone planting the seed, and then someone else coming along and watering, and then God making it grow. And when you think of that going on in a field, it's like a farm. Or maybe if it's a little bit smaller, like a garden. And particularly, because it's God's garden, God's field, whatever, Paul probably has in mind like an orchard, or something like that, like a king's orchard. And again, this was common in Paul's world, where the kings, as a part of their palace complex, would have like a area that was lush with vegetation. They typically called it a garden, right? That was well cultivated. It was a place where the king could go to kind of relax and enjoy some time, right? Well, there's a pretty famous garden in the Jewish scripture, right? Back in Genesis chapter 2. So flip back or click back over there with me. It's on page 4 if you grab the free Bibles, real back far at the beginning, right? The creation story starts in a garden, in a field that God has planted and cultivated. So here I want to read beginning in verse 7. We're going to read 7 and 8 and then skip over to verse 15. Genesis tells us that the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground, and he breathed the breath of life into the man's nostrils, and the man became a living person. And then, after God had created the man, the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he placed the man he had made. So God plants a garden, and he puts the man in the garden. And then here's the other important piece from verse 15. It says, the Lord God planted the man in the Garden of Eden to tend it and to watch over it. Okay, so for the Jewish people, the world sort of began when God planted a garden, which again, God's a king, so the kings have gardens, right? God plants a garden, and then God puts the man in it, puts humanity in it, puts us in the garden, and our job is to till it and to keep the garden. We're supposed to garden with God, right? But again, it's God's garden. God's the one that planted it, right? So the idea in the Hebrew creation story is that God created us to be partners with God in cultivating the world and taking care of the earth, right? And treating it like a beautiful, lush garden that our king has appointed us stewards over. Does that make sense? Our job is to cultivate. So that's when Paul's talking about a cultivated field that belongs to God, this is what's in the back of his mind, right? The garden of creation, the garden of the world that we've been created and called to cultivate. But what about the building? That's a little bit trickier, I think, especially for us, because we don't think the way ancient peoples thought of the world. But believe it or not, the idea of a building is also tied to creation. The Hebrew people, and actually ancient people all over the world, thought when they thought of the world, they thought of a temple. Okay, so we're going to flip over to Isaiah 66. And again, if you're in the free Bibles, that's page 444. Now, when I ask you to picture the earth, you picture a ball hanging in space orbiting the sun, right? We all do. That's because, we have satellites and space shuttles and all that kind of stuff. When an ancient person, if you'd ask them that question, again, it didn't really matter if they lived in Babylon or Egypt or Israel or wherever, ancient peoples pictured a cosmic temple. So if you read, you can even see this when you read through like the Psalms and stuff like that. They talk about the earth having pillars that it stands on and the sky being held up by pillars because they understood that the world was a temple that God lived in and ruled from. Okay, again, this is the one that's really hard for us to get to because we're just so far removed from them culturally. But when an ancient person thought of the world, they thought of it like a temple, like a building. And you can see that in Isaiah 66, verse 1. I just want to read this real quick for you. You get a real clear picture here. God says, heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Could you build me a temple as good as that? Could you build me such a resting place? Right? No, God here is saying, I built the best temple when I built the world. The world is my temple. And they understood that. When a Jewish person read the creation story in Genesis 1, the 7 days of creation, they read God building a temple for himself. And then they understood that anytime they went into an earthly temple, it was like an echo of or a representation of that larger cosmic temple. And again, we could spend like 100 hours here because this is one of my favorite weird things in the Bible, and I love it, and it's so interesting. We don't have time. So what I want you to hang on to is that the idea of a building as creation is something that is intricately woven into the way Paul saw the world. When Paul thought about the world that he lived in, he thought of it as God's temple. So creation as a building means that creation, the world itself, is the place where heaven and earth are one, where God lives with God's people, and where we have the privilege of worshiping God as people created in God's image. That's what it means for Paul to say that creation is a building. But then for Paul, creation is also a garden, right? A place where God has put us to join in the work that God is doing alongside us, right? We see what God is doing and we follow along. God planted the garden, we cultivate the garden. So creation is a building, creation is a field or a garden. So I want to go back to 1 Corinthians 3:9. Look at what Paul says here. You are God's field, you are God's building. Because of God's grace to me, I have laid the foundation like an expert builder, and now others are building on it. So what is the building that Paul is talking about? What is the thing that our faith is meant to build? It's a temple. It's a place where heaven and earth overlap. It's a place where we connect with God, where we worship God, where God changes us and sends us out into the world to cultivate, to bring life, to do fruitful things, right? Again, important to hold on to. If you were here a couple weeks ago and Sue preached, she talked about the difference between a garden and a bunch of weeds, right? And the difference is time and attention, right? Something is growing. The question is, what is growing? Are we putting in the time in our world to cultivate fruit, or are we just allowing weeds to grow, right? And for Paul, what we're doing here in the church as we're building a life of faith is we are building a life where we meet God, worship God, are changed by God, but then go into the world to cultivate a fruitful world. It's both of those things in one, which is why he pulls those two metaphors from his Jewish background and links them in this passage. You are God's field. You are God's building. So it's worth asking the question, what kind of life, what kind of faith are you building on the foundation of God's love for you? I think some of us build towers, right? We look out at the world and we see it as a scary place that's full of dangers. And so we turn inward. We get protective of ourselves and of whoever us is, right? Us, our family, us, our people, us, our group, whatever. And we build a tower to protect so that we're safe. Keep out others. But again and again and again in the scriptures, we're reminded that the temple is meant to be open to all, welcoming all, a place where we are gathered so that we can bring others to God. We weren't meant to build a tower. We were meant to build a temple. Others of us build platforms. This is me for sure. We want to claim, or we want attention. We want power or position. And so we build on the foundation of Jesus' love opportunities for ourselves to advance or to perform or to receive acclaim. Even just this morning when I was praying before I got into memorizing this morning, the prayer book that I was using, it just gives you like a one-sentence prayer to meditate on. And the thing it said this morning was, make sure you're doing the work and not worried about who gets credit. And I was like, okay, yep, good, it's good. I need that. It hits me where I live, right? That's me. This I am all about building platforms if I'm not living in who God has called me to be. But we have to remember that the temple we're building is God's temple, not my temple. Right? Not your temple. God's temple. And so our lives ought to be about doing good works, but making sure that is pointing consistently back to God and not about seeking power or acclaim or position or authority for ourselves. So we're not meant to build platforms. We're meant to build a temple. Like some of us build forts. We're angry. We see a world around us that's hostile towards what we want, and so we want to fight it. Right? We want to be right. We want to be certain. And so we build a life of faith that goes on the attack. But we have to remember that one of the fruit that grows in God's garden is peacemaking. Love, joy, peace, gentleness. is God did not intend us to build forts. God intended us to build a temple. Again, some of us, I think, build things like banks, where like it's all about the bottom line for us. And I think that's a kind of looking for security probably, right? Where we're convinced if we can get enough zeros in our checking account or our savings account, then we'll feel secure and we'll feel safe and we'll feel like we have enough. Or we're chasing some kind of other thing other than building God's temple. We're trying to build, something that fits more like what the world values, a bigger house or a nicer car or whatever. I think we're all caught up in building something. And so what I really want you to ask this morning is, what am I building on the foundation of God's love for me? If someone were to look at my life from the outside, I mean, we all do this, right? We drive past, we're driving through Rowlett, and we see there's like a new spot of ground has been cleared off, and there's like some kind of, sign there, and we're like, ooh, what are they building there? And then the next time you drive by, there's like a truck there or something, and you're like, what's it going to be? And as the building starts to go up, we all start to ask that, what do you think it is? And then usually as the building gets closer and closer and closer to finish, it becomes more and more obvious what it is, right? So I'm asking that question. If someone were driving past the plot of land where God has laid that foundation, and they're seeing what you're building, what is it? What do they see? What are you building on the foundation of God's love? And I say that because the life of faith is a lot of work. It is. I mean, I hope that we take our faith as seriously as we take anything else in our lives, that we're investing as much of ourself and our faith as we are anything else. And if you're doing that, then you're not idle. You're spending a lot of time and energy pouring yourself into spiritual formation. You're spending a lot of time and energy pouring yourself into gathering with folks here on Sundays or gathering with your C groups. And I hope that as you're putting all of that work in, you don't want to end up like Frank Gehry in the Museum of Pop Culture, right? Where you stand back and go, oh, that didn't come out like I wanted, right? I hope that you're creating a life where you're cultivating the world around you, even as God is transforming you. We have a few opportunities coming up in the fall. I'm super excited. It seems like as over the summer, as the leadership team was meeting and kind of looking at our fall, it seemed like we have just like all these back-to-back service opportunities. Opportunities for us as a community to be a part of cultivating good in our city. The one Sue talked about already, Trunk or Treat. If you've been at Catalyst, you know that we used to do Trunk or Treat with Chick-fil-A up until last year. And then basically Rowlett's been growing a lot and the traffic on 66 has been getting heavier, and Chick-fil-A came to us and they said, we just don't feel like it's safe anymore. The whole point of Trunk or Treat is we're at a safe space for kids to, get candy and have some fun. And we just don't feel like it's safe anymore. There's much traffic and, cars coming in and out of the parking lots causing a lot of problems. So they shut it down. And I know you were sad because you expressed that to me. You're like, well, what are we going to do for Trunk or Treat? And last year we said, we don't know. We just didn't do one. Well, our city does a Trunk or Treat. It's actually put on by the library, and we were able to partner with them this year. And so we're one of, I think, only 11 organizations in Rowlett that's going to be doing the Trunk or Treat. And it's different because when we were at Chick-fil-A, everyone kind of did their own trunk, and it was basically like a Catalyst party at Chick-fil-A, right? Well, this year we are doing one trunk, and we're one of several. So we get to, do an awesome trunk. You didn't hear it from me, but there is going to be a secret award for best trunk. So if we happen to win it this year, whatever, I'm competitive, that's fine. That's not why we're doing it, obviously, but it would be whatever. So we have a chance to come together, pool our resources, and do that. And again, this is going to be one of those things where if we all show up, we're going to have way too many people. And that's fine. We're just going to go have fun with our city, enjoy getting to celebrate, being together as a community, and being Catalyst in the midst of our people, right? We're Catalyst here, but this is a chance to go out and be Catalyst in the midst of our people to, again, provide that space for kids to come and enjoy trick-or-treating together. I'm super excited about it. And so I hope I hope you have it on your calendars. I hope you're going to come out and do it with us as well. Because, again, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. In November, again, I might be boring you with all this inside baseball stuff, but in November, we've been doing a food drive for the last several years. And the food drive, they always ask us like a week or two before Thanksgiving, hey, we're going to do this food drive. And so we have to get to you at the last minute. We're like, hey, you have like 3 days to get all this food so we can turn it in before Thanksgiving. Like, please help. We don't know if they're doing the food drive this year. We assume they are, and we assume they're going to give us about 4 days notice. So we're just going to go ahead and collect food starting at the beginning of November anyway. And if they don't end up doing the food drive, we'll just take it to Life Message anyway, which is where the food always goes. So we're going to be doing a food drive, hopefully with other people. If not, hey, you know what? We're collecting food. And then basically right after Thanksgiving is when we always do our Rowlett Reindeer. It's Operation Reindeer now because we do it for kids outside of Rowlett. But that's where, again, if you've been around, you know, we buy gifts for families that's parents aren't able to afford them, and then we wrap them, we give them, and so the parents can give them to their kids as though from the parents, right? So we're enabling families to celebrate Christmas the same way the rest of us celebrate Christmas, right? So again, it's just a way to extend some love and some grace. And then the leadership team is working on another Advent offering. Last year we bought bicycles for pastors in Malawi so that they could serve their people and be able to again, lift all kinds of burdens, everything from being able to go and do church in areas that didn't have churches to very basic things like transport water to and from different places. And I think our original goal was 4 bicycles, and I think it was like 17 or 18 bicycles that we ended up being able to give last year. And so we're looking for a similar project like that. But again, those are just what we're doing as a whole church family over the next several months to be able to cultivate good in our world, to be able to join in what God is already doing. I know many of you are also doing individual acts of kindness, whether those things are, in your dorm rooms or in your classrooms or with coworkers or even in your own families, that you are working to cultivate goodness, those fruit of the Spirit that we talk about all the time, right? That you are working to cultivate those things. And that's what it means to be church. That's what it means to work as a life of faith, that we are allowing God to transform us. Because we're building a temple. We are being changed by God. We are the place where heaven and earth overlap. We are the place where heaven impacts earth and changes. And then we're God's field. We are where God is producing good fruit, and God is calling us to tend that and to cultivate that in the city and in the world around us. That's what we're building. So again, I just want to reiterate, I hope that you're making the work that you're putting into your life of faith worthwhile. I hope that you're being intentional and thinking about what it is you're building on that foundation. Because you're putting in the work. You might as well be putting in work towards the right thing and building the thing that God is calling you to build. Now, some of you might in the back of your head be wondering, well, maybe I haven't been building the right thing. What does that mean? That's next week. Don't worry, we're going to talk about that. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. But today I just want you, and as we move into this time of reflection and response, I want you to consider that question. What am I building? Again, if someone were to drive past that foundation that God had laid in my life and wonder and speculate, would they be able to see the temple that you're building? Would they be able to see the fruit that you're cultivating in the world around you? What is God calling you to? How are you being changed so that you can be an agent of change in the world around you? We're going to come to the communion table because all of this, again, it is impossible to overstate that everything we're talking about is built on the foundation of Jesus' love for us. That Jesus set this table for us. That Jesus invites us to come to the table as his brothers and sisters. Not because we were worthy, not because we earned enough spiritual merit badges, not because of anything other than the fact that Jesus loves us. That's what makes a spot for us at this table. And so we come today to share in the meal that Jesus shared with his followers the night before he was killed. When he broke bread and offered to them and said, "This is my body broken for you. Take it, eat it." After the meal was finished, he passed them a cup of wine. He said, "This is my blood. It's poured out for the forgiveness of sin. Take it and drink it." So you don't have to be a member of Catalyst to receive communion with us today. If you are someone who is willing to build a life of faith, to be part of God's temple, part of God's field, then you're welcome to come forward today and receive communion with us. Before we come, I'm going to lead you in a prayer of examine. I'm going to ask you just a few simple questions and give you some time to reflect prayerfully on them so that you might be able to reflect with God on how to respond to this message. And then after we're done with those questions, I'm going to pray for all of us. And then as you're ready, you're welcome to come forward and receive communion. So here's the first question I want you to consider. Again, prayerfully ask this to God. in the last week, what has your faith produced in your life? What fruit can you see there? Now, from the outside, what does it look like you're building? Again, just ask God to give you that sort of God's eye view of your life. What am I building on that foundation of Jesus' love? And finally, what does it look like for you to build God's temple this week? What is God calling you to do by faith in this next week? Let's pray together. God, you have gathered us today that we might hear these powerful metaphors that your servant Paul used. Thank you, first, for laying a foundation in our lives that is purely based on your love for us and not on anything that we do or earn. So that what you call us to is a response to you, that this life of faith that you're calling us to build, that you're calling us to cultivate, is one that we do in response to your love for us. We have heard this morning that you call us your temple, that you call us your field, your garden. And so we ask as we come to your table this morning that you would reaffirm for us what we're building, that you would open our eyes to see what the life of faith that we're pursuing is creating. And we ask that you would show us as we receive these wafers and juice. Make them a spiritual food for us that we might see what you're calling us to, how you are calling us to be transformed, and how you are calling us to be your people, cultivating the garden of the world that you've placed us in. Thank you for the incredible blessing we have to be called yours. And thank you for the privilege and the responsibility that you've entrusted us with to go into your world as your representatives and create the kind of fruit that your Spirit produces. Thank you for making us your people. Thank you for making us your building in your field. Send us from this place, a changed people, to work change for good. We offer these prayers and we approach your table this morning in the name of your Son, Jesus.
stand and join us for one last song this morning?
Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. I know the nights won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You've never failed. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. Oh, you never failed me yet.
Everybody say your promise still stands.
Your promise still stands.
Great is your faithfulness.
Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You've never failed me yet. You never failed me yet. And I'll never forget.
A couple of things as you're going. First, as always, thank you to all of you here at Catalyst who are regularly supporting the congregation through your giving and through serving. Thank you for making it possible to do what we do here. Thank you so much. Also, again, if you are a guest with us, I want to reiterate how grateful we are that you're with us. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us this morning, that you've been challenged and encouraged. And if you're looking to get connected to a new congregation, we know that that can be tricky, so we created an experience that makes it really easy to do that. It's called the Newcomers Lunch. We do them once a month. The next one is actually today. So if you don't have lunch plans, feel free to stick around. We clear some tables, chairs out, set up some tables, and in about 45 minutes, we tell you who Catalyst is and what God is doing here. We give you some next steps to get connected. If you want to come to the one in November, right? This is October. Okay, we're good. If you want to come to the one in November, then just check the box at the top of the card and give us some info so we can get an RSVP and drop in the box by the door on the way out. And but again, either way, I just want to say thank you for being with us this morning. And then also, I know many of you already know, but this is our worship director, Shakita's last Sunday with us. So we wanted to just take a moment to say thank you. So you have to come up here. So again, thank you. You've been with us for about a year. And we wanted to give you this small token of our appreciation. My wife chose the bag, so it's a happy birthday bag, but it's a shark bag most importantly. So thank you so much for leading us for the past year. We're grateful, and we'll be praying for you and your family as you move on to other things. But again, just would you all thank her with me for the time she's given with us. And of course, one of the beautiful things about being part of the body of Christ is that goodbyes are never forever. So we expect to continue to have a relationship with you and see you again. So thank you again so much. All right, I'm going to send you off, so make sure you come and give Shakita a hug. And then again, if you're a newcomer, stick around. We'll get started with that. But as you're going Catalyst, I just want to send you and say that you are God's field. You are God's building. God is doing a work in you so that you can be a part of God's work in our community and in the world around us. So would you go spend some time this week exploring what it is that you're building, what kind of building your faith is constructing, so that you might know what God is calling you to. And as you do that, know that the one who called you and who laid that foundation of love in your life is with you, working within you and working around you. Go in the grace and peace of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week.
Oceans deep, my faith will stand, and I will call upon your name, and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I